Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about.
Hi, AHP listeners. This is Rachel, the producer of the show. In today's episode, you're going to hear host Ryan Coonerty in conversation with New Deal leader and Connecticut State Senator Christine Cohen. Now, Senator Cohen ran for the state legislature back in 2018 after serving on her local school board and working as an engaged citizen in her community. As the owner of a local bagel shop, she's brought her experiences leading a small business to bear as a member of various legislative committees, including the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, the Environment Committee, and now as the co-chair of the Transportation Committee. She talks with Ryan about the misconception that Democrats are not pro-business, and how she's pushed back on this by forwarding a pro-business agenda of her own, including some key work on paid leave. Senator Cohen talks about how policymakers can lean in to support small businesses in these uncertain economic times, and what keeps her motivated to continue serving in elected office. Enjoy.
Connecticut Senator Christine Cohen, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thanks so much for having me, Ryan.
I want to just start by asking you about your journey from Cohen's Bagels to the state Senate. Was it a direct line? How does running a bagel business impact your work in the state legislature?
Well, it certainly has an impact, and I wouldn't say it was a linear path to get to where I am today, as you might imagine. So I was
It should be circular, right? Because it's just in the bagel thing.
That's right. Nice fun. So I was a marketing major in college. I graduated with a business administration degree. I went into corporate America thinking I was going to climb the corporate ladder, had dreams of becoming a corporate CEO one day, and ended up becoming CEO of my own small business, Cohen's Bagel Company, together with my husband. And we have been in business for over 20 years and proudly serving the Connecticut shoreline primarily, but all across Connecticut are bagels. And I, along the way, got involved with local politics. I actually was seated on the Board of Education in my hometown of Guilford, Connecticut, and got really interested in policy considerations particular to education. At the time, the 2016 election had just come to pass, and like many folks across the country, I was reeling over the course of events, what it meant for our country, and really felt like we were in a crisis of sorts. And so I began chatting more and more with folks who really had policy determination and were leaders in our state in terms of policy considerations, recognizing that local and state government were more important than ever. Certainly at the time, organizations like She Should Run and Emily's List were coming to the fore. And I really was interested in seeing more female leadership, certainly with the loss of Hillary Rodham Clinton, was really considering what does this mean for women across the country, that we are females not electable to higher office and wanting to change that. And so I think that's the story for many of my colleagues, because we saw this influx, particularly in those midterms in 2018, come into the state houses as well as local positions across the country. And the Connecticut was no different. I was elected in 2018 to the state Senate after a little nudge from my predecessor, as well as a friend and colleague and New Deal leader, then Representative Sean Scanlon, who approached me and said, "You should run for this seat. You're ready to do this, and we think you'd be fantastic. We really want you to be a voice for the people of the 12th state Senate district in Connecticut." And so I did, and I have been in office. I'm now in my 4th term and my 7th year in the state Senate.
Can you talk a little bit about how you made the jump from small business into running for a Senate seat, and what skills applied for maybe some small business owner out here who may be wondering how they can engage in local or statewide office, and then also what didn't apply.
Right. Well, every day is a new day with new twists and turns. And so, there's a lot of unpredictability in policy work, but I would also say the same holds true for businesses. And I will say one impetus was, for me in particular, was as a small business owner, the frustration in regulation. I really felt like small business was overregulated, that there was a lot of duplicative processes that small businesses needed to go through, and sort of hurdles with respect to just opening the doors, but then just on an ongoing basis. Silly things like licensure. Licensure is very important, but do we need, 4 licenses to be a bagel shop, or could we do with just one bakery license? Do we need a health inspection at the state level and the local level, or could we do with one, state level inspection or one local level inspection? And so these were the things that were frustrating to me. And when I decided to take the leap and run for the state Senate position, I found so many small businesses coming to me wanting representation in the Capitol in Hartford, saying, this is what I'm finding in my line of work. This is what I see in my sector. This is what we could be doing to expand growth in this sector, in this industry. And so it became a passion of mine. In fact, my first couple terms, I was vice chair of the Commerce Committee. I worked alongside many small businesses, not just in my district, but really statewide, worked with the governor to come up with some pro-business legislation that we ultimately passed, like getting rid of things like the business entity tax, which really was a small tax burden on small businesses, but just another tax burden, and something that we really could absorb elsewhere. And so things like that became a driving force for me, hearing from small businesses all the time, like, hey, this is an easy fix. Why can't we get out of our own way on this? And so I was proud to be a voice for small businesses up there and continue to be.
I just want to ask the follow-up question, and I can't tell you how sympathetic I am to what you're talking about. I'm a son of small bookstore owners. My wife owns a jewelry store, and the Democratic Party should be the party of small business. The small businesses connect to the communities, job creators. They create economic opportunity for people across the spectrum, and yet we have a reputation, sometimes deserved, sometimes not deserved, as not being there to help small business thrive and survive. What's your sense for what the Democratic Party needs to do better in order to better, first, most importantly, support small businesses and the crucial role they play in our economy, but second, just connect and have the trust of small business owners?
Yeah, I don't know where this reputation came from along the lines that somehow we've become the party that's anti-business. We are really the pro-business party. As you said, if you really look at the legacy of Democrats, it's this legacy of opportunity and, creating opportunities where maybe they hadn't existed before. Certainly for minority populations, getting more females involved in the workforce. There's just so many entrepreneurial opportunities for folks out there to truly live the American dream. That's what this country is all about. And so it's unfortunate that we've seen sort of this labeling of Democrats as being anti-business when in fact it's quite the opposite. And we're seeing this sort of play out right now in the current state of things, and really needing to help our small businesses survive in these uncertain times. I would say that the Democratic Party really stepped up to the plate during the COVID-19 pandemic when our small businesses really needed us most. And I'm so proud of the work that we did across the country, but in particular in Connecticut, to ensure that small businesses could continue to grow and thrive during probably the biggest challenge that they would ever face. And so, I think what we need in the Democratic Party in terms of just small business and thinking about how to help our economy grow and thrive is really just more pragmatic progressives, thinking, listening to folks who are experiencing this, boots on the ground, but also taking our own experiences, lived experiences, and bringing those to the table to really get things done.
And you've applied those lived experiences to paid family leave and to healthcare and now to transportation. Can you talk about some of the policy initiatives that you've engaged on in your time in the state Senate?
Yeah, I would say paid family medical leave is a perfect example of something that became incredibly partisan in the state of Connecticut, and it was tough to get across the finish line. And I kept scratching my head thinking, this is a pro-business initiative. I want to make sure that my employees feel cared for, feel happy and healthy. And this was a way that our paid family medical leave program was a way to have employees pay in to a system that they could take from when they were most in need of needing to do that. And so we were able to establish a program that really worked for everybody. And so I became an outspoken voice in this regard and making sure that we could get this over the finish line, but also making sure that business owners recognize the benefits of providing something like paid family medical leave to their employees at a time when we have really struggled with providing other benefits. The cost of healthcare has become astronomical and very difficult for small businesses to maintain health benefits for their employees. I know, I've had this experience. I used to be able to offer all of my full-time employees full health benefits. And unfortunately, over time, that became unsustainable. And that's the story for so many businesses. It's why I became an outspoken voice on a public option for businesses across the state of Connecticut. Now, we've still had trouble getting that to the finish line for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that Connecticut is sort of known as the insurance capital of the country. But I will say we're still fighting that fight and working on real solutions to make healthcare more affordable for small businesses and folks across the state of Connecticut. So I'm proud of that. When I first came in to the legislature in 2019, when I was sworn in, I became the Senate chair of the Environment Committee, and those initiatives have been near and dear to my heart. We've been able to get things across the finish line, like a ban on plastic bags, which I led in the Senate, as well as a ban on PFAS chemicals or forever chemicals, which we're learning more and more about every day. I'm still seated on the Environment Committee. I transitioned to chair of the Transportation Committee, and there is so much overlap. In fact, in my last year on the Environment Committee, I worked with former New Deal leader, Senator Will Haskell, and together we partnered up and created the Connecticut Clean Air Act, which at the time was Senate Bill 4. I'm so proud of the work we did together, and it's what led me to my passion for transportation and transportation emissions. And so, the two are sort of inextricably intertwined, the environment work as well as the transportation work. And so I'm proud to continue in that tradition and do work on reducing transportation emissions, not only by, creating electric vehicle initiatives, but also by promoting public transportation, which we all know has so many benefits beyond just environmental benefits, certainly economic benefits, and mental health, quality of life benefits for folks.
So, we made it all of 15 minutes before we're starting to talk about the Trump administration. But one of the impacts has been a dramatic shift in transportation policy and cutting off funds for both EVs and public transportation. Can you talk about how you're navigating this huge shift that's occurred in the last 2 months?
Yeah, the reality is we've had a lot of federal assistance when it comes to transportation and transportation-related initiatives. Most recently with this past administration, obviously the IIJA, the Infrastructure Act, we, like so many other states, were able to take advantage of unprecedented federal funds, really, with respect to transportation infrastructure. And a lot of those initiatives had to do with climate, coastal resiliency. And so now, fast forward, here we are in this new administration, and we're sort of getting whiplash, right? Because here we were told that in order to get this funding, you needed to show that there were climate related necessities with respect to these dollars. And, certainly we have a big coastline in the state of Connecticut. We're faced with sea level rise. And so, there's road damage there. There's bridges that are in need of repair. There's new bridges that are needing to be created, and creative ideas with respect to road raising and what have you. And now, I'm privy, as well as so many others, to internal communications with the US DOT that say, if you see a state has received funding between 2022 and 2025, and there's the word climate in there, if there's the word resiliency in there, flag that funding, because we're going to put a hold on that funding. And so that's a scary time for states. And I will tell you, Connecticut has some unique challenges with respect to transportation. We are a pass-through state, which means our roads are used frequently by our neighbors to the north and south. Because we're a small state, and so we've got Boston to the north, New York to the south, and so we enjoy our visitors, but there's a lot of traffic on our roadways, tearing up our roads, and we do not have any road usage charges. We don't have tolls. We're the only state on the eastern seaboard that doesn't have tolls, and we like the federal government, who relies on the Highway Trust Fund. We have a special transportation fund for the purposes of paying for our roadways. And this is all in the time when the gas tax, which we rely on both at the federal level and the state level, is diminishing, right? We have more fuel efficient vehicles. We're using electric vehicles more, which is wonderful. possible. But we need to be creative about what our funding mechanisms are. And because the state of Connecticut doesn't have tolls and doesn't necessarily have other ways to fund our transportation infrastructure, it becomes a challenge for us. We're highly reliant on those federal funds. And so when an administration says, oh, just kidding, we're going to yank the rug out from under you, you're not going to be able to take advantage of these funds. After all, it's a very scary time. What does that mean? Do we have to dig in to other resources? Do we have to dig into reserve funds? And these are questions we have across the board, not just with respect to transportation, certainly with respect to education and the dismantling of the Department of Education. What does that mean for public education? And then certainly Medicaid funding. We know that public health and our departments of public health just received major cuts with respect to immunizations and epidemiology research. So, we're dealing with this across the board, and I know other states are as well, but I think Connecticut is set up for some unique challenges with respect to transportation in particular.
So, you laid out a huge number of challenges and impacts, and I think we're also just at the beginning of seeing these things play out, some of which will have decades-long negative impacts for centuries to come. Can you talk about how the leadership in Connecticut is trying to probably not get caught up in the day-to-day chaos, but trying to develop a strategy to respond and reduce the harm on your state and communities?
Yeah, I think Connecticut does. We have great leadership in Connecticut, and I'm so lucky, blessed by some incredible colleagues who are so smart and talented. And I will say that I think these past weeks have presented a bit of an ideological challenge and a crisis of sorts for me, because I have been known as pragmatic. I have been known as working across the aisle to get things done. I've worked in a bipartisan way because I do believe that if we come to the center, that's where we can get the movement and we can move forward together, taking important steps. And I've been proud when I go out to town halls and various community events to say that 90% of what we do in the state of Connecticut is done on a bipartisan basis. I've been really proud of that. But watching what's gone down over the past several weeks has been disheartening to me. And I wrote an op-ed on this because I really feel like there's been a shift, and we are seeing unprecedented cuts to just create a huge detriment to our society, really. I mean, we're talking about the basics: housing, food, shelter, water, clean water, transportation. I mean, cuts across the board, public health. We're going to create a humanitarian crisis. And I am not hearing anything from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And that's been really concerning to me because I don't want this to set Connecticut on a path of hyper-partisanship. We're seeing that at the federal level. And now more than ever, because of that hyper-partisanship, we are going to need to rely on the states and local governments to really get things done. We are going to need to go into the coffers and figure out what it is that's important, what defines us as a state. And I believe it's taking care of our people. Making sure that, that we've always been a sanctuary state. We want to make sure that people who come to Connecticut are well cared for, that they have the food that they need, that they have the jobs that they need, that they have an education, a free and public education. All of these things are so important, and that they can get from point A to point B for connectivity, for workforce, for recreation, for all of these things. And we are fortunate that we have been planning with leaders to have a budget reserve fund that is healthy and stable. And for the first time, we are really contemplating what that looks like. Are we going to need to dig into our rainy day fund, into our emergency coffers to provide for the people of Connecticut? And this is on the heels of some very good years where we've been able to give back to the people. We've been able to provide important tax cuts. We had our child tax credit that's had been successful. We want to push for more of that. And all of these things come into question, whether or not we're going to be able to raise our Medicaid reimbursement rates, because now we're talking about a severe Medicaid cut. Are we going to be able to raise this in a time when they're desperately needed? Or are we going to have to cover a huge shortfall because our federal government has decided they're no longer going to support these important programs? So these are very scary times, important times for us to make these considerations and work together in a collaborative manner. It's never been more important for us all to lock in arm in arm and figure out how to protect our people.
Speaking of protecting people, you, in addition to all these big issues on clean air and transportation, you've had a real focus on mental health for specific vulnerable populations and crisis response. Can you talk about those efforts, why you engage those efforts, what you're doing, and what kind of impact you're seeing on the ground?
Yeah, well, and certainly, we saw that our country was really dealing with a mental health crisis post-pandemic or during the pandemic. And now we've come out of that and we're sort of dealing with a mental health crisis in so many other ways, right? We're just when people's livelihood is really being threatened right now. I probably started on the mental health journey many years ago, before I even realized that I was fighting for mental health policy. My mother is a psychiatric social worker. I grew up in that environment where mental health care was always very important. I've talked about my own struggles with depression and anxiety over the years very openly, in the hopes of reducing stigma around discussions with respect to mental health care. I've been a huge proponent of mental health parity, treating illnesses of the mind just as we do illnesses of the body with respect to insurance and care, availability of care. And so it seemed very natural to me coming into the state legislature to continue on this journey and fight for mental health care in so many aspects. But something that really spurred my interest was a friend of mine, a local producer, actually produced a documentary called Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops, and it followed two crisis intervention officers in San Antonio, Texas. They have their own crisis intervention team, and it's something that they take very seriously. And the film inspired me. I started digging in Connecticut to find out how many law enforcement officers were trained in crisis intervention, recognizing that so many of the calls that they have are in fact related to mental health and crisis. And I found out that while we did have a program, there were many police forces in my district alone that really had no officers trained in crisis intervention. And I'm proud to say that over the past 6 years, that's changed dramatically. We've been able to secure funding for crisis intervention training. We've been able to move that forward. And now we see so many forces. Most forces across the state of Connecticut have at least one officer trained. Many have all of their officers trained in crisis intervention. And now we're seeing more and more funding for police social workers and things of that nature. This past session, I introduced a bill to address mental health care in our corrections department, in our prison system, because I do feel that that is lacking right now, and it's something that we can certainly improve upon. And so I hope that we'll see forward movement with that as well.
That's amazing, and it is critical because it is so many of the calls, and you're both getting better service to the folks experiencing crisis, but also maintaining the mental health of your first responders, who will have the better tools to deal with those issues day in and day out. Last question. I can imagine, a small business owner out there probably just trying to hang on with these crazy tariffs that are increasing prices and blowing up supply chains. And they want to get involved in public office, but it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, and for so many people, the whole system seems so broken. So I guess, in our closing moment here, what keeps you going in trying to keep all these, both your business going and serve and try to navigating these very treacherous waters?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Ryan. I think what's really important is that we continue to have a representative democracy, and that we have folks from all walks of life, all different skin colors, backgrounds, sex, origin. It's just that it's who we are as a country. It's who we are as a state. We're a melting pot, and our legislatures should look the same way as the public. And so that's a driving force for me, and making sure that I have a voice up there. I would say to others who don't think that they can do this or don't think that they have a voice, I am you. I'm a perfect example of that. I would have never guessed, when I was opening up a bagel shop or, getting my kids, rearing my children, and I had a busy life in so many other regards, that I would be here in the state Senate informing policy and working together with colleagues to really make sure that we're making a difference in people's lives. And I think now more than ever, we need folks to step up to the plate and run for local and state office. And I hope that folks out there listening will give that some serious consideration and reach out to your representatives. Reach out to me. I'd love to chat with anybody about, what's involved in running for office, what's involved in being a politician and serving the people, and, how rewarding it can be to be on the side of things, just having the privilege of representing folks and listening to their daily struggles and how we can make their lives better.
I love that. Thank you for making your service an honorable profession. Thank you for joining us today and being part of New Deal. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. You as well.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.